Homer's eyes opened to the familiar ceiling of 742 Evergreen Terrace, but something felt wrong. The morning light filtered through the bedroom window at an odd angle, casting shadows that seemed to writhe and pulse. As he descended the stairs, each creaking step echoed with an unnatural resonance, as if the house itself had grown larger. Deeper the kitchen doorway revealed an impossible sight. Dozens of Homer Simpsons sat around an expanded table that stretched far beyond the rooms. Original dimensions. Some were thin, others grotesquely obese. One wore a suit and tie. Another was covered in radiation burns that pulsed with a sickly green glow. A Homer with perfectly combed hair sat next to one whose scalp was completely bald, revealing intricate patterns of scars beneath the skin. Beer, they all said in unison, but their voices created a dissonant chorus that made Homer's teeth ache. In the living room, infinite versions of Marge sat on couches that multiplied like cancer cells. Her iconic blue hair twisted in impossible spirals. Some reached the ceiling, others grew downward into the floor. One Marge's hair moved independently, each strand ending in a tiny mouth that whispered secrets in languages that hurt to hear. "Homie?" they asked simultaneously, their voices overlapping into a sound like breaking glass. Bart skateboarded through the air on paths that defied physics, his multiple selves leaving trails of afterimages. Some Barts were elderly, their faces wrinkled, but retaining that mischievous grin. Others were grotesquely young, their baby teeth sharp as needles. One Bart's head had split open like a flower, revealing smaller Barts nested inside, each one laughing with increasing pitch. Lisa sat at her saxophone in the corner, but the instrument had fused with her body. Her fingers had grown into the keys, her mouth permanently shaped around the mouthpiece. Multiple Lisas played a cacophonous symphony, their merged forms creating a writhing mass of flesh and brass. The music wasn't sound anymore. It was a physical presence that pressed against reality itself. Maggie crawled across the ceiling, her multiple forms leaving wet trails. Some were adult-sized, but retained their infant proportions, creating beings of impossible anatomy. Their sucking sounds created a rhythm that synchronized with everyone's heartbeat, growing faster, more urgent. Which one of us is real? They. Homer at the head of the table asked, his voice deeper than the others. As he spoke, his face began to shift, features sliding like melting wax. "I remember being born," said a Marge whose pearls had grown into her neck, the beads visible beneath translucent skin. "I remember meeting you, Homer. I remember everything." "So do I," replied another Marge, this one whose hair had begun to consume her face, leaving only her eyes visible in a nest of blue strands. "We all do," they chorused. Homer tried to speak, but found his own voice multiplying. Looking down, he saw his hands were splitting, fingers dividing like branches. He was becoming them, or they were becoming him. The distinction had lost all meaning. Lisa, the one who still looked mostly normal, stood up from her fused saxophone. "This is wrong," she said, her voice the only clear sound in the chaos. "We can't all exist in the same space. We're tearing reality apart." As she spoke, one of the elderly Barts suddenly screamed and clutched his chest. Immediately, all the other Barts doubled over in agony, their skateboards clattering to the ground. The pain rippled through them like electricity through water. "We're connected," Lisa whispered, understanding flooding her eyes. "We share the same soul, spread too thin." She began to move toward the center of the room, but with each step, her shadow split. First one shadow, then two, then dozens. The shadows began to rise from the floor, taking on their own substance, becoming new Lisas. Each one was slightly different. One had her hair in pigtails, another wore glasses, a third had aged into adulthood, but retained her childlike proportions. "No," Lisa said, watching her multiplying selves. "I was trying to stop it, but I'm making it worse." The new Lisas began to speak in mathematical equations, their voices creating formulas that hung in the air like smoke. The equations described the multiplication process, but understanding them only accelerated it. Knowledge itself had become a virus. The house groaned under the weight of infinite families. Walls stretched and bulged, trying to accommodate the ever-expanding number of residents. Through the windows, the neighborhood had changed. Every house on Evergreen Terrace was now 742, each one containing its own multiplying family. Ned Flanders appeared at the door, but he was wrong too. His face was perfectly symmetrical, divided down the middle with mathematical precision. Half of him wore his usual green sweater. The other half was naked, revealing that his body was constructed from interlocking geometric shapes. "Heidi-ho. Neighbor Inos," he said, but his voice came from the mouths of all the Homers at once. "Looks like you're having a diddly of a multiplication problem." The Marges began to laugh, and their laughter was the sound of hair growing, of pearls forming in oyster shells, of time itself stretching. One Marge reached out to touch Homer, and where her fingers made contact, his skin began to divide, creating more surface area, more of him. "We can't stop it," Lisa said, but now there were hundreds of her saying it. "Every time we try to understand it, we create more of ourselves. Every time we feel fear, we multiply. Every time we love each other, we split that love into smaller pieces." The Maggies on the ceiling had formed a pattern, a spiral that seemed to draw the eye inward. Looking at it for too long made thoughts multiply, memories split and recombine. Homer remembered being Bart, being Lisa, being Marge. The boundaries between them dissolved. "Maybe," said a Homer whose head had grown to accommodate multiple brains, each one thinking different thoughts. "Maybe there never was just one of us. Maybe we've always been infinite, and we're just now seeing it." The saxophone music from the Lisa Orchestra reached a crescendo, and reality cracked. To the Fishers, more versions poured in, Simpsons from timelines where they were animals, where they were geometric shapes, where they were nothing but voices in the dark. The house was no longer a house, but a concept stretched beyond breaking. The family was no longer a family, but a single entity experiencing itself from infinite perspectives simultaneously. Love and fear and memory flowed between them, like blood through veins in a body too large to comprehend. Dot in the center of it all. One Lisa, the original perhaps, or just the one who still believed she was, stood perfectly still. She understood. Now that stopping the multiplication was impossible. It had always been happening. Every moment of their lives had created new versions, new possibilities, new realities branching off from each decision, each breath, each heartbeat. "We are the pattern," she whispered, and her voice was carried by every version of herself. Every Marge, every Homer, every Bart, every Maggie. We are the multiplication. We are infinite, and we are breaking the universe with our love. The last thing the original Lisa saw before she dissolved completely into the infinite family was Maggie. All the Maggies, sucking their thumbs in perfect unison, their eyes reflecting not the room around them, but every possible room, every possible version of this moment, stretching on forever in every direction, beautiful and terrible, and absolutely, inevitably real.